Hello, photography lovers. How are you guys? So, this is edition of the Fashion Photography Podcast. My name is Virginia. I'm usually the host of the Fashion Photography Podcast, but you can also see me here in the YouTube channel. So, if you feel like you want to learn more about fashion photography, you can simply go to photographypodcast.net and listen to more than 340 episodes. So, what we usually do is on Wednesday, we're meeting with different people connected to the fashion photography world, and we're simply talking to them, talking about their careers, their business, their steps into the business. And every other Friday, I'm giving you some tips and tricks on photography. I'm doing that because I've got about 15 years of experience in the industry. So I love doing that. I love sharing with you. I love giving you information. And that's exactly what we are doing today. It's not the whole thing, it's not the podcast. This is an additional quarantine edition where we meet live with different guests of the podcast and we talk about their work in particular. So, guys, if you feel like you want to know more, photographypodcast.net is the place to go. If you feel like you're a little bit generous and you want to support the podcast, you can simply go to our Patreon page. You can also find it on photographypodcast.net. There is a big donate button, and you can subscribe to our Patreon account. You can do this by just donating $1 per month or two, or whatever you feel like. But if you don't have this opportunity right now, there are other ways to help us. So, for example, you can share this live with other photography friends because this is really going to help us. Also, you can, let's say, subscribe to the podcast. You can like this video. You can comment under it because all these things are helping us to reach more people and really, really helping us with the algorithms. So, I don't want to keep you waiting for today's episode. This part of the podcast is called the creative series, the creative process, and we're meeting different people that are sharing with us their creative process. And today we're meeting a guest of the podcast, and I'm super, super happy to welcome Nicole York. Hi, Nicole. How are you?
Hello, I'm good. I'm super excited to be here.
Oh, we're super excited to have you here. So tell us a little bit more for those of you that don't know you.
I am a freelance photographer, focusing mostly on narrative stuff that goes toward key art, so book covers, movie posters, things like that. I'm also a freelance writer and author, so I write for outlets like Fstoppers and Pro EDU and Adorama, and I also am an author of fiction novels as well. So I have 2 novels of a trilogy that are currently out on places like Amazon and Barnes and Noble. So yeah, I'm also a mom, a rock climber, a dog lover.
Yeah,
All the
you're a
things.
lot of things all together.
Yes.
And you guys, if we already have like 3 different episodes from the podcast with Nicole, so you can find them all on photographypodcast.net. And I think one of the topics today could be about you being so multitasking person. So I think this is going to be really nice to make sure that we talk about. But today we're also going to talk in particular about particular images of yours.
Right.
But before that, I would like to see. I can already see people commenting, which is so
Yay.
cool. So Olga, thank you so much for the comment, and I would also like to say that you guys are more than welcome to ask questions in the comments, to be active there. Like, give us signs because that's the beauty of having life, right? You can ask questions now. So be active in the comments, and yeah, I think it's going to be amazing. So, Nicole, I think it's going to be a good start to warm up with some of your images,
Cool.
and that I think this is a way for the people to kind of get to know you a bit more because your work is, in my opinion, very related also to your fantasy work
Yeah.
as a writer, in my opinion. Okay, perfect. So, Today we're going to discuss the creation of this particular image, right?
Hmm.
Okay. So what do you want to tell us about it? How the whole idea behind this photo shoot came to your mind? What was the most unexpected thing? Come on, give us details.
Um, so I had been wanting to try something with angels for a while. As I was growing up, that was always something, angels were always really incredibly magical and like beautiful. And it's something I had never photographed before, though I had wanted to. And this particular model, Charlie, she came down to visit me from Colorado. So her and her dad drove down to New Mexico, and we basically just scheduled a day where we were going to try a whole bunch of different things. And one of the things I knew I wanted to try was doing an angel series. And so I'd made these wings in advance with turkey feathers and like wire and all, and like a really lot of hot glue.
You made
But
them by yourself.
yes, yeah.
So cool.
Yeah, it's not too hard, but it is really time consuming. And my fingers from the hot glue gun, like I had really, really sore fingers. But yeah, so, and then the other thing was I'd known I'd wanted to shoot with clouds. And so I was using, it's basically just cotton batting. So the kind of thing that you would put like in a pillowcase or something like that. So I bought a lot of that and then put it all over the ground. And a friend of mine actually runs a company called the Backdrop Studio. So if you see the kind of cloud backdrop, that is from
Yeah.
her thing. And so I was testing out some of those for her. So it was a really good opportunity to combine all of those things together. And I definitely wanted it to have the feeling of just ethereal beauty and sitting in the clouds and just kind of almost Renaissance inspired color
Mhm.
palette and lighting and things like that. So, and this model is such a dream to work with that when we were there creating, everything just kind of fell together really easily.
How many photos did you take this day?
So we did several different looks that day. Everything from she was an angel, she was a fairy, she was also like a medieval warrior, and we did beauty work. So I probably took 500 to 700 photos that day altogether. But of
Wow.
this set, I think it was only maybe 20 or 30.
But like edited, ready to go outside.
Oh, finished images. So I think the from her angels, maybe 5 altogether. Probably about 5 from each set, I think, was about where we ended up.
So you're putting so much work into the set and you're ending up with just 5 images. So, I'm a bit of a business person. So tell me, where can we use a photo shoot like that? So for the people that are watching the show right now, they can imagine where their work is going to fit in terms
Sure.
of clients.
So sometimes images like this are personal for me. Sometimes it's just a personal project that I'm willing to invest in. So I recognize I'm going to be maybe losing a bit of money at first. But if I'm doing things like, going to portfolio reviews or doing things where I'm showing personal projects as a way to introduce people to my work, then that might be kind of a long-term investment as far as, letting people know what I do and bringing them toward me. But sometimes these are turned into fine art prints that people can buy and have. Sometimes these become book covers. This one could potentially be that, although it's not the right format. But and the other one is certainly more suited to, the
Yeah.
aspect ratio that you would need for a book
Mhm.
cover. So yeah, sometimes those move in that direction. Um,
Mm,
and those are kind of the main areas for
yeah.
this particular type of stuff.
Okay, so you've got some experience with book covers before.
Mm-hmm.
But everybody knows that this is kind of a closed world, right? So very limited number of people are going for this because the demand for photographers of book covers is not very high. So
Sure.
tell me, how did it happen for you?
So I think because I made my first covers, and I was already part of writing communities online, and they knew that I had made my first covers myself. And then I was approached by other authors who were interested because of the way that I work. They were interested in working with me on that. So then the images either became inspiration for them, or sometimes when I put the images together as a book cover, they don't even get used. People just like what I do, and so they want me to then do other things. So in essence, it kind of becomes an advertising piece.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what these images have been. So when people come to me because of seeing these images, they're not always wanting these particularly, but they're wanting me to do something else because they like the style. And then once you've worked with one or two authors and created things for them, then of course it gets easier to work with other authors. And also they know, once they've been working with me, they know that I'm a digital artist as well. So they will sometimes, I can combine the photography and digital art. And so sometimes I will end up doing things like character portraits or other stuff because they've seen the photography in the first place.
Was there a moment in your career when you wanted to devise those two passions of yours?
Like to divide, like go in separate directions with them?
Photography, yeah, photography and maybe you being a writer.
Yeah, so when I very first, I've been an artist since I was a little kid. So I wrote poetry and books and things like that, like little kid books, not real ones, but and then I also always was drawing and painting and just making anything I could make. So I was a photographer for probably 8 years before I started writing again. And that's partially because my kids were still little. And in order to write well, you need to be able to have no distractions. And so it's difficult when you have toddlers hanging off of you. But I started writing, and I realized when I had something that was book sized and book quality, that if it was ever going to sell well, I would need to promote it. And I worried that because my presence in the photography community was already established, that if I started using the same name as an author, that it would confuse people and they wouldn't know what to look at or where to go. So I used my father's name, and the last name is McEwen.
Mhm.
So I thought I'll do that, and I'll just have two separate presences, and I'll try to balance those things. And so for a couple of years, that's what I did. I had two separate websites, two separate Facebooks, two different Instagrams. And it's really, really difficult for anybody who can balance two entirely separate careers. You guys have props from me because that's so incredibly hard. So it didn't work well. Although I learned a lot of lessons from it, a lot of lessons about marketing and community and networking and things like that. And
That's so cool. So you can share some of them with us.
yeah, well, I learned, for one, that photographers rarely pay other photographers, but they will pay other artists. So the writing community would buy my photography, but they would sometimes buy my books. Writers are readers, so that's one of those areas that has some overlap. But however, photographers would buy my cartoons and my digital art, but would rarely ever, invest in photography, whether it was, fine art or headshots or anything like that. And so it really taught me that your network is not your client for the most part. Like your network is usually the people who are, giving you opportunities or building you up, or you're collaborating with business ideas and things like that. And then your potential clients, while they certainly can fit in your network, those are the people you're actively marketing to, actively advertising to. You're kind of chasing that business with those people, and your group of friends, your network, those are the people who are giving you ideas and supporting your vision, and the people who you cry on their shoulder when you're feeling frustrated. And that trying to exist in those two worlds as the same person, but different aspects of that person, just kind of drove home the point that most of the artists I knew, they were trying to market to their network, and their network didn't need them.
Yeah. So I think the balance you were able to create, because you said they're not your network, but they can be the people that are actually giving you ideas. So I
Mm-hmm.
think this is a balance that not everybody can do, because I can see from my network and lot from all of the people that are commenting and sending us DMs because of the podcast, I can
Mm-hmm.
see that people are really not very they don't really know that. They're not actually understanding it that well, because for example they're opening Instagram and they're following other photographers, and they're complaining that no one else is buying their work. But
Yeah.
if your whole network is only from photographers, nobody's going to need you. And at the
Yeah.
same time, I think the biggest problem comes when you're not advertising to anyone else.
Yes. Yes, yes, yes. And I have written about that before, and I speak about it often because I want to encourage other photographers, having learned that lesson, and other artists as well. So digital artists and writers and people, most artists, we will complain like my family and my friends, they never buy my things, and
Yeah.
well, they're often not your audience, and so there's a difference between your support network and then your audience, and you have to be able to recognize that one is there to be your family and your friends and your support, and the other is there to pay you money for your services. So it's great to be able to share with other photographers and get feedback and inspiration and ideas and support and all of that stuff. But you have to understand that you're creating a service and a product, and those are going to be consumed by a certain person, and those are the people that you need to be directing your attention toward. You need those people to see your advertisements, your top of mind marketing, all of that kind of stuff has to go to those people. And I
Are
think
there
it's really
any-
easy to get caught up in getting praise from your peers because that feels good, right? When somebody who's good
yeah.
at what they do is like, nice work, you're like, it feels so good, but it doesn't actually put any money in your pocket.
True, absolutely. Are there any other good things that you learned from this experience when you were trying to divide your work?
I learned that one person is only capable of so much. And I thought that I would be good at everything. And it's not that I couldn't be good at it, but it's that I just only have so much time in a day. So I have kids and my husband and my family. I still want to have a life. So I still want to go exercise and hike and climb and do other things. And then I have to be able to create things. And then I have to be able to market those things and build the platform around those things so they actually have visibility. And there just is not enough time in the day for one person to do all of that successfully.
Yeah.
So you have to, I was at a point where I was either going to have to outsource things, which was a possibility, but when you're building an author platform, just like when you're building a photography platform, that takes a lot of time and investment, and it's a long-term payoff. So within the first couple of years, you're not really going to see as much income from that because you're still building a presence. And so putting all of my time and effort into building an author platform while ignoring photography means that I'm losing on both sides, because now I'm losing income and then I'm also trying to build. So unless I was making enough money to outsource, a lot of that marketing and other work, I was going to have to let something go. And
And now that, yeah, go ahead.
I couldn't bring myself to do it. I couldn't bring myself to cut something off and be like, nope, I'm not a photographer anymore. I'm just going to write books now. And I thought I could do that and I couldn't do it. And then I thought for a while, well, I can't cut writing off, number one, because I write as part of my photography life. I'm a writer as well, but also I have 2 books out of a trilogy done and I'm working on a 3rd one. And I think my readers would strangle me to death if I didn't finish it. So
Well, now that you decided to combine those two, I was wondering, have you ever been in a situation where people are like, "Oh, you used to be a photographer, let's say, or you used to be a writer." Do you ever have to clarify in front of your audience or the people that you talk to, what are you actually?
So it's still a fairly new. I went ahead and combined websites, and I gave myself kind of a branding makeover. And I think because my fiction writing is fantasy based, and then a lot of my work is very narrative and storytelling and very much magical in nature. Even I think the things that are more historically based, like when I've done cowboys and things like that, it has a very cinematic feel to it. So I think there's a lot of crossover between those two genres. And most of my audience follows me on social media platforms, and I do share some of my life there. So most of them know that I'm a multidisciplinary artist anyway. And so it doesn't, they think, come as much of a shock to them to find that I'm doing most of those things. So I haven't had to clarify or worry about that too much yet. We'll see if that becomes a problem in the future. It'll be interesting. I don't really know how I will handle it. I guess we'll have to wait and see.
So we'll have to have another conversation like this.
Yeah, after it happens.
Do you want to get back to the angel photos? And for those of you that are only listening to this as a podcast, we are live on YouTube, so you guys can follow the podcast on YouTube. It's called the Fashion Photography Podcast. We're not that creative at writing a name and also names. So it's just that easy, the Fashion Photography Podcast. And we're discussing some images in particular, so you guys can go to the channel and you will be able to see them too. So Nicole, let's go over these images.
Yes.
So do we have the same model?
No, so this is a different, this is, her name is Jessica Thomas, and she's here in New Mexico. And she had reached out to me after I moved to the area after having seen my work, and she really wanted to work with me. And so we did a few different things as well. But as I was already working on the Angel series, and Jessica has such a beautiful classical look and these really fantastic cheekbones. And I was like, we have to do that. So, and also, you know, adding to the series was post, like pre-COVID, adding to the series was something I was trying to continuously do. And I had the idea of all of the angels I had photographed so far were stationary. And so I really wanted to give her more of a sense of movement. And I wanted to kind of bring her down through the clouds. And so I had been brainstorming ways to composite that so that it looked like she was flying. And so, as you can see from this BTS shot, so that's my son, my oldest son, Hunter. And I've got her on a stool, and we practiced beforehand, like how she would be able to balance. And I'm sitting way on the other side of my garage to be wide enough to get that shot. But so we had a fan going that was trying to blow some of her hair around. And then my son was tossing the material to try to give it a sense of movement. And I feel like it was actually able to composite really, really well. I'm really happy with how it turned out. So of course, now I have 8 million other ideas for how to make it look like somebody's actually flying. We'll see whether or not those are successful.
Well, so these two photo shoots, these are two different photo shoots that you showed us. They were not shot at the same day. So I've got a very practical question for you.
Sure.
And I know it's probably not what people expect, but I think it's also very important to know these little things because no one is telling you about them. So where do you keep all your props? Because they're probably not just a box or two.
No. So my husband and I, we battled over garage space. When I very first started photography, I basically took over the entire garage. The poor man could not change the oil in the car. And so when we moved to this new house and had a garage, he was like, I need to be able to use the garage. So our garage is not just the one big square space, but there's a little kind of cubby hole that's in one side. And it's tall enough for a bookshelf and deep enough that I can, if I pack everything up, I can kind of stuff it in that space. So all of my props, everything breaks down and everything kind of just goes into that spot. And I have to take everything out and put it all away every single time I shoot.
That's work.
It is. Yeah, it is.
But
makes the husband happy. So
I believe that if you had the chance to keep them all at the same place without having to store them. It would have been easier for you to do like the compositing afterwards, because right now it really depends even how you're going to, it always depends how you're going to place your light, but even just a slight difference, it's going to be very obvious in these images. So I think it's a challenge. let's
Yes.
let's put it like that.
Yes,
Okay,
it
so
is.
I said that I know that you've got lots of probes for, because of the reason that there is also another photo shoot that you're going to share with us about today. So let
Hmm.
me share my screen so that people can see it. They already had like a little snippet of it. But let's talk about this one because I find it fascinating and
Ew.
also a little bit dangerous.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
right.
Um,
So tell us more.
yeah, so I was scrolling around through Pinterest and I had seen a sculpture by Frederick Hart called Ex Nihilo, which means from nothing. And it's a really beautiful sculpture that is hanging over the Washington Cathedral. And basically, it's kind of circular in nature and it is a bunch of humans coming up out of the water.
Oh.
And because it is sculptural, the water has an almost ambiguous quality. When I first saw it, I thought it was some kind of smoke, or it's definitely has the sense of movement. And he sculpted it really extraordinarily. But the light was coming from above, and just the way that everybody was emerging from that, I knew I needed to photograph that somehow. I needed to do something like that. But I didn't want to replicate what the original artist did. I definitely wanted to do my own take on that. So I thought, if ex nihilo is referring to the creation of man from nothing, then what happens to man afterwards? And what physically could that look like? The becoming, or the being, or the dying, where how all of that kind of could potentially be shown visually. And so I started planning and experimenting in my garage with being able to have smoke and then have people kind of rising up out of the smoke. And so I did that. I had a little teddy bear. It's actually the teddy bear my husband takes with him when he deploys. Its name is Honey Bear, and it has recordings of my voice and the kids' voices in it. And so I put him on the ground and I surrounded him with it was just poster board on the ground until it made a circle. And then I bought a ground fog machine and I put some in there. But what I discovered is that it rises too fast and then it actually fills the air and you can't shoot through it. So I discovered that a mix of using the ground fogger plus using dry ice with water kind of put a base layer over the top, and then the ground fogger gave you a more of a sense of movement and kind of bigger shapes. So once I figured out in general how to do that, then I brought a model into the studio, and it was December and it was freezing cold and she was amazing, but I had to put things down on the ground so she wouldn't freeze. And then we had to keep things relatively cold to keep everything low, because once the ground fog starts heating, it rises. So she moved through a series of different poses, and I tried to have her move in organic ways so that it wasn't a pose and then reset and then a pose, because you only can work for so long before you have to air the space out because of how much smoke rises into the air. But the idea was to leave it somewhat ambiguous. Like somebody mentioned, they couldn't tell if it was agony or ecstasy. And I love that, because then it really depends on the viewer and what they're bringing to the image. Do you see it as somebody struggling to rise from pain, or do you see it as somebody, in kind of ecstatic movement? And so once
How
I
do you guys
was,
see it?
what's that?
Yeah. What about the people in the audience? How do you guys see it? Tell us in the comments. I, for example, when you told me about the dead and what's going on with the body afterwards, I was like, oh my God, I've never even thought about it. Like, I was so amazed. Okay, that's very exciting. There are actually two directions that I want to go to
Yeah,
after um, this conversation, but I'm going to start with the first one because the second question is very obvious and people will understand if they're looking at the image. But the first one is something that you mentioned you did not want it to replicate.
right.
So, this is a big topic, especially for the people that are coming to the industry. So, have you ever been copied? What's your opinion on that?
Oh yeah. I've not only in my photography, but I've had my writing outright plagiarized
Oh,
before as well. So it's definitely something I'm familiar with. And I think I agree and understand that there's nothing new under the sun. Most of what we make is an interpretation or permutation of things that have already been created. Often we're bringing then our own experience and our own aesthetic and our preferences to the things that we're using as inspiration. So, in a lot of ways, although of course there are some things that are new every now and then. Most of what is being made is reinterpreting things that have already been made or combining things that have already been made. And so, in that aspect, I don't mind it at all and I'm comfortable. And in fact, I've actually volunteered several times to allow artists to be able to use my images so they can study them for painting or other things like that. And I've had artists come and do artwork based off of my work and then share it with me. And I have no problem, with that as well, as long as it's purely for the practice and things like that. But when it comes to straight plagiarizing, where you are taking what somebody has done and copying it down to the pose and the light and the makeup, and where you couldn't justifiably say that you took inspiration and made something new, then I do have a problem with it, because what happens is you end up getting the credit that the other person deserves. Or in the case of the person who plagiarized my article, they got hundreds of thousands of views, which means people were looking at the article he took from me instead of the one that I wrote, which meant
yeah.
I lost a lot of money. I lost potentially hundreds and hundreds of dollars.
Mhm.
So in
Did you
those
do anything?
cases, so luckily F-Stoppers is really good about protecting their writers that way. And so my editors reached out and it ended up being removed, which was good. But oftentimes there's really not much you can do. And it's frustrating, especially if your work is getting kind of stolen or pirated by people who live in countries that don't have copyright laws. So sometimes there's just not much you can do about it. But ultimately, I do believe that each person is so unique and individual that if you are approaching something in your own way, even if somebody tries to replicate you, they're not going to be able to do it because they're not you.
Ab
So that is I guess that's the main thing. You should use inspiration, take what other people have done, reinterpret it using your vision. You should not be copying, but ultimately I'm not going to lose sleep over it, because I'm still me. And you know,
Yeah,
the
no
reason
one.
people come to me is because of me, not because of,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely. No one can do what you do simply because they don't have the same experience. They don't have the same point of view. So
Yep.
there's sounds like just two small reasons, but actually those are the reasons that are creating you as an artist,
Mm-hmm.
because you are a reflection of your work, or maybe it's the other way around, but I think it's working both ways. So yeah, somebody has to be really in your shoes to be able to create
Yep.
something
Yep. Agreed.
just like you, or simply they're going to copy you. But
Right.
again, not going to look the same way. So in this particular image of yours, the other direction that I wanted to go to was talking about asking your models to pose for you naked,
Mm-hmm.
which is something that not everyone is able to do. And it's something that we're going to have a whole separate episode about that's coming up on the website.
Mm-hmm.
But now I've got the chance to talk to you. So let's scratch that topic. Do you want to tell me? You said that you know the girl already.
I
Oh,
did not. I did not know her
oh,
at the time.
oh
So
man.
this, no, yeah. This model, I reached out to, since I'm still relatively new to the Albuquerque area, I reached out to some of the other photographers. We have, of course, a local group, a Facebook group for people, models and photographers in the area. And so I let them know I was looking for models for this project, for a fine art project, and let them know what the inspiration was and what the purpose of it was. And for these, I did pay the models. So I didn't want to ask somebody who had never met me before to come in
Yeah,
and shoot in the nude for free. And so I also asked other photographers if they had anybody they knew that they could recommend. And so one of the other photographers in the area, Lauren Shipman, let me know that this particular model was comfortable doing this kind of work and put me in her direction. And so when I talked to her and explained, this is what it's for, this is what we're doing, there is no, it of course is meant to be fine art. It is not meant to be objectifying in any way.
yeah,
And that ultimately they have control over what, is seen.
yeah.
And so, and of course I showed them the images so that they can, they see everything. And so, yeah. So it's not really that difficult if you're willing to wait, because sometimes it will take a while to find somebody. And if you're really transparent about what you're going to do and what the purpose is, and make sure that the people you're working with, so as you can see, she's wrapped in a blanket. I'm really, really, I take care of my models, whether that's like I
What you
have
do.
food brought in, or if we're on location, I've got sunscreen and I've got water and I've got, other things. And I'm making sure that we take breaks. And if we're working in a cold situation like this was, I have a heater close by and I have a blanket and we take breaks so they can get warm. And so I think if the model that you're working with understands that you have no intention of using them for yourself, you're collaborating with them to create something beautiful. And if they know what the intentions for the work are, I think in that case, you're going to be able to find people who are willing to work with you based on them being able to trust you and based on the quality and the direction of your vision.
Many people are very confused, especially at the beginning, who is supposed to pay who. I've got
Mm,
Yeah, right? So I've got a very distinguished, like I've got an opinion on that, but I would love to hear yours because we're here for you today.
yeah. So if I want to make something and I reach out to my community, there's times when people are willing to collaborate with me because they like my work and they're going to be able to get portfolio, images out of it. And so they're
Exactly.
happy to come
Mhm.
and collaborate with me. Then there are times when I want to make something and I don't want to collaborate. I have an idea I want you to fulfill. And this is now not about collaboration. This is about me making something that I have in my head. And so at that point, I'm paying somebody because you don't get any input on what's happening now. You're here to do a job for me. And then by that same token, if I see somebody that I really want to work with and I approach them and they say, here are my rates, then my option is to be like, cool, I really want to work with this person. And I think they're the right person for the job. So I will pay them because I want to make this thing. Obviously, this has nothing to do with client work, because if we're talking about client work, then that's the cost of the model is budgeted
Yes.
into the session. So this is an entirely different thing. But if I'm making a thing and I want you and you're not interested in collaboration, then I will pay you. And if you need portfolio images, or if you approach me with an idea and I love that idea and I'm on board and I want to work with you, I may collaborate with you. But if you approach me with an idea and I don't need it for my portfolio and I'm not really interested, then I will let you know my rates, and I will certainly, you can certainly pay me and I will create the thing that you would like to make. So if both people are equally profiting from having amazing portfolio work afterwards, then a collaboration is awesome. If you want to make a thing I'm not really interested in, but you think I'm the right photographer to do it, you can certainly pay me. And if I want to make something you're not really interested in, but I think you're the right person, then I will pay you. And that's kind of that's how I approach it anyway.
I completely agree. It's exactly my method also. So I think it's obviously working. So I usually ask it about the end of a conversation. And by the way, guys, this is the time to ask questions. So go ahead. And I usually ask, what are your tips for the people that want to do something like this? Like they want to use a fog in the studio or they want to create angel wings. So, what are your tips? Though you already gave us a lot, but you might have also something up your sleeve that you're hiding.
Oh, my secrets, all my secrets.
Yeah.
Um, Basically, I think honestly, my biggest tip is to give yourself the time to imagine things first. Like to give yourself the time to let your mind wander. And if you've come up with an idea or you're inspired by something, sit down and just dream about it for a while and close your eyes and picture it and allow that idea to kind of marinate and manifest. And I spend a lot of time imagining things long before they actually ever come to fruition. I visualize them and what I'm going to do and what it's going to look like and where I'm going to put things and how the light's going to be. And then if it's something like this that I need to get right the first time, where I'm not going to be paying a model to come back multiple times to test things and get them right, then, grab a mannequin or a family member or something and test that stuff out. Try the light, try the smoke, see what works and what doesn't. Learn from those mistakes before you have to put them into action. And then also, don't be afraid to fail at things. The angel wings, I bought a bunch of stuff. I had never made them before. I had looked in several places to try to find what I wanted, but they're thousands of dollars. So the option was to try to make them. So then I am the king of internet research. So I will go looking everywhere to try to find ideas for how I could put them together. But I knew that I was going to fail. So if it was not going to be successful, well, then it wasn't successful, but I'm going to have learned something from it that I can then put into use later on. So allow your imagination to do its thing. Spend some time working through how it's going to be actually viable. And then don't be afraid to fail. Don't not do a thing because it might not work. Do it anyway. And if it works, then you won. And if it didn't work, then you have a bunch of lessons that you've learned that you can put into, use for the next time you try the thing.
Cannot agree more. I'm so happy that I asked you this question because I was sure that there is something super good that you're going to share. Thank you so much, Nicole. We learned a lot from you today, so it was a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you for having me. I always enjoy talking to you, and I hope it was helpful.
It was. I'm sure it was. And I cannot wait to repeat this again. Thank you, dear. Have a great day.
You too.
So, guys, I really think that was a blast. I hope you had a great time too. If you want to, and of course, if you feel like you're finding something new or something useful from the podcast, definitely like the video, comment after we publish, and of course, subscribe to it and hit this notification bell because this is what's going to remind you the next time we're having live session over here. And what we do is usually having one every Monday. So come over next Monday so that we can talk. And if you feel hungry for more, you can just go to photographypodcast.net. And this Wednesday, we'll be releasing part 2 of our episode with Benjo Arwas. We also have another episode here at the YouTube channel where he's sharing about some of his photo shoot in particular. But in the podcast, we're talking about his career. So if you want to learn more about it, you can simply go to photographypodcast.net. And by the way, there is a little snippet that I want to share with you. Nicole is having her YouTube channel, and she was interviewing me last week. So you can go and definitely check out this video. Once the live is published, I'm going to link her channel at the end of this episode, so you can go and check it out too. Thank you guys so much for being with us today. I can see you writing some sweet comments. Thank you, Annie, so much. You love the live stream. I'm so grateful when you guys are sending us comments, because this is giving us so much insight. Otherwise, you feel like you're talking to yourself. So thank you so much, Annie, for this. Thank you, Olga. You were so amazing at the comments today. You were constantly just updating us. How do you feel? So thank you guys so much. Thanks to everybody who watched, did not said anything. I hope that next time you'll be a little bit less shy. So guys, I'll be waiting for you next Monday, and of course on the website photographypodcast.net.